Welcome to Off the Post. I'm Russ Cohen. We've got Anthony Mingione. And how are you?
This morning, doing pretty well, and we are powered by Upper Deck Sports.
Thank you. And Michael Jello, having trouble counting to three. Mike, how are you?
I have no trouble counting to three. I'm a product of the Buffalo school system. And Russ is usually the one with the plugs.
No, but that was good. It was good. It was like I was already lagging. It's a Sunday morning. You don't know what you're going to get out of me on a Sunday morning, honestly. And we have special guest Joe Yurden. Joe, how are you?
Doing great, guys. Good to see everybody once again. It's been a little bit.
Yep. It's been a minute. All right, so let's talk about Owen Power. Hey, let's talk about him. He's the top-ranked prospect. I did just put out my third rankings. If people want to check it out at sportsology.com, they can, and he's not going to change. He's my top-ranked guy. He's been that way, and he's going to stay that way. But he did go on NHL Network and did a very interesting interview where he basically said he's kind of leaning towards going back to college. So, Joe, honestly, we know teams have been Zooming players, and they'll continue to do it as we head into the draft. And at the end of the day, there must have been some sort of communication that said to the Powers team, hey, let's just put this out there that he might go back to college. Just so you know, he's not against playing in the NHL, but now he might go back to college. And I just feel like the timing of that has to do with the way the communication went with the Sabers and Powers. What do you think?
You know, I think when you take a look at how things have gone with the Sabers, obviously the last 10 years, it's not been good. And certainly of recent years, it's been even worse. But I think perhaps in Power's case, he's looking at how things have been handled with guys recently. I know with Jack Quinn, they were kind of forced into a spot because, and I don't know if that's Buffalo's fault or if it's Quinn's people's fault for him not getting into a European league. First thing, while things were ramping up because, there was no schedule for the OHL and they put him in the AHL as a, 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old. And that, it didn't really go that great, but I mean, guys that age playing in an adult league in Europe probably goes about the same. So I think maybe they see that. They see the way things have gone, with Dahlin, where he's had 3 different coaches now in 3 years.
Yeah,
and you see how it goes from way high to looking like he doesn't even belong in the league to being like, oh yeah, no, this guy is actually really good. And you see the way things are handled with Middlestat. You see all these different things, and I think if your Powers advisors, not necessarily the agent yet, we know how that goes, but but I think if you're his people, you're kind of wary of what the decision making is going to be from the Sabers, because if they do a full teardown and rebuild, Power might get thrown right into the Sabers might want to throw him right into the Wolves, which I don't know. That's asking a lot of somebody like that. I mean, he handled himself at Worlds very well, but it was a big step up from what the competition he saw at Worlds and what he's going to see in the NHL.
And Joe, I don't think, okay, if Kevin Adams and the hierarchy of the Sabres believe that Owen Power is the best prospect in the draft, and this was sort of a shot across the bow to them, I don't think it's going to dissuade them from taking him. Because, if he goes back to college, this was a screwy year. If he goes back to college and gets a full year of college experience and gets stronger and is, a better player than even the one that played at the World Championships, I think that's nothing but a benefit to the Sabres. I don't think they go off of him and go to a Beniers or go to a Clark or somebody else who I think is probably a little bit of a step down. I think they'll say, go back to Michigan. We're going to be getting our own house in order, and I don't think they'll be dissuaded by that.
Yeah, I can't see them getting scared off by words. I mean, if they already had ideas that Owen Power was going to be a Buffalo Sabre first thing next season, I don't know what to tell you there.
But I do think that that's probably what the thought process was, Joe. And I think that's probably why he came out and said this. So his options are open and he doesn't get slammed into something that maybe doesn't look good before the college season starts. So, and I do think this was, again, if the Sabres were dead set on having their first round pick be in the NHL this year, then they might change their mind. I mean, there is a possibility of that because, again, sometimes teams want that. most of the time we see these first rounders play no matter what. Most of the time they're not ready. And so, I think this is a way for Power and his people to sort of keep that at arm's length right now.
Well, yeah, I think there's also some safety when it comes to the college aspect, because the only time, if he stays in college, the only time they're going to be able to see him is in the post draft, like the prospects camp, that they do. That would be the only time they would ever be able to see him on the ice against anybody who's reasonably within his competition. And that's even if they do one this year. I don't know.
And that's if he decides to go to that camp. Sometimes they don't go the first year because they don't want to pay for it.
Well, there's that. And also he's played a lot of hockey. Yep. I mean, compared to other guys, he's played a lot of hockey, especially going to Worlds. So but like if he stays at college, like he won't be at training camp because he's not allowed to be there. And I think there's some safety there. Now, again, like if they're using that as a cudgel against the Sabres, it's interesting because I think the other guy that's high on the Sabres list is Beniers, and he's the same situation there. But I think if it's not to say that Beniers is of the same
unless
mind.
He says I'll play in the league right away.
Right. Which I mean, again,
which he might be saying on Zoom, we don't know.
Yeah, right. But if that's like his decision making though, and if that's how the Sabres going to break it down, like, well, we can get this kid in here next year. Everything they talked about last year when they got rid of everybody, all their scouts, everybody in the AHL, they said they wanted to stress development and they wanted to rebuild the pipeline. If you're picking guys based on who's going to come and play in the NHL right away versus going to college, that goes against everything that they said. But then again,
Joe, they already went against it by putting Cousins in last year. They went against it anyhow.
No, I don't think so.
It was early for him. If we all think Dylan Cousins was ready for the NHL last year, he really wasn't. But they threw him in there anyhow.
No, I disagree completely because if he goes back to Lethbridge, what else is he getting there other than winning the MVP outright and destroying the rest of the WNHL or the WHL? Like, I don't see what the benefit is there because I mean, even if you send him to Rochester, they couldn't send him to Rochester.
No, they couldn't send him to Rochester. No.
So there was zero benefit in having him go back for an overage year in Lethbridge, and playing him in the NHL. There's going to be bumps, but that's why they went and got Eric Stahl. That's why they had Jack. They had those guys to kind of surround him and give him that veteran shoulder to lean on. So that's a completely different thing. The thing I will take as a shot, as a bad shot for them developing, is how they played Jack Quinn at center before he went out with the hernia. Because if you wanted him to play, if you wanted a center, if you wanted to draft a center, they had a load of guys to pick from instead of picking Quinn. But instead, they saw 50 goals. They said, "Hey, all right, this is what we need. He plays the wing, great." Well, it doesn't do you much service when you're putting him at center. So, geez, maybe we got another center here.
Joe, considering the situation, obviously with the Sabres right now, you had a recent column for Died by the Blade about preparing about with the situation with Jack Eichel and the fact that Sabre fans and everyone need to pretty much get ready for the inevitable post Eichel era. How do you feel that the Sabres will prepare for that in terms of potential acquisitions if you're going to be sending out Eichel, what is it in your mind that would be an acceptable return, despite the fact that other GMs know the situation is pretty untenable?
Well, as far as return, I mean, you got to break the bank. I mean, you don't have much of a choice. I mean, you're going to have to take somebody with a lot of money coming back, which, if you scheme out trades with LA, maybe you're taking Jonathan Quick. Or maybe you can twist their arm into taking Dustin Brown. I don't see the Kings letting a guy like Brown go because he's played very well the last couple of years. But Quick, could see them moving on. Cal Peterson looks like he's locked in there. But I mean, you know how people get attached to things and people that won Stanley Cups, those things happen. But if it's a team like Anaheim, maybe you're probably taking Adam Henrique back. I think that would be part of it. Also, maybe you're paying off a couple million on Jack's contract just to kind of help grease the wheels a little bit more for some teams that might say geez, I don't know, 10 million a year is a lot. It's a flat cap for a few years. So, maybe can you help us out? Because if you're tearing it down, Sabres salary situation is they shouldn't be a cap team at that point. Especially when, you got guys in the LCs, you've got guys that are looking to go into second contracts, which are probably going to be bridge deals, I would imagine, at this point. But But I mean, they have options here. If their whole thing is just they're going to move Jack, and they want to try to stay afloat. I mean, there's some question in doing that, but I think that's when you can go back to Sam Reinhart and say, okay, you're our number one center. We want to pay you to keep you here. Are you interested? And then it's kind of in Sam's boat. If he says, no, I don't want to do that, then you trade him.
Which is fascinating, Joe, because again, I know you've spoke before about the fact that the Sabres were hesitant to even play Reinhart at center, and now in that scenario, he could be their number one center.
Yeah, well, I mean, he played so well at center when he was basically forced into it. With Eichel was out, they traded Stahl. And, Middlestat was they're still trying to figure out where he fit into things, but they told Sam, hey, you got to play center, and he played very, very well. He looked like it made the Sabres look pretty boneheaded in retrospect for not playing him there to begin with. But that might have been more Jack saying like, hey, Sam's my right winger, we got to play together. But yeah, they're in it's a weird spot. But I mean, the thing with Reinhart though is he's RFA this summer. He has arbitration eligibility, and he's UFA. If he just signs a 1-year deal, he goes UFA next summer. Right. So that's what I mean. Like if you get a commitment from him that he wants to stay long term, you do it. Especially if you're moving Jack. But if he doesn't want to stay, you got to move him. Like you don't have a choice. You have to trade him too.
And Joe, the other shoe to drop is Rasmus Ristolainen, who in the season-ending media availability was sort of non-committal. Oh, I could stay or I could go, but he's got a year left. He's a UFA after next year. He's been, constantly a subject of trade rumors. I would think that this summer is, you either move him during the offseason or you move him at the deadline. And I would think that they would probably get bet more in a deal, and it would have to be a hockey deal in the offseason. If they trade him at the deadline, it's a David Savard deal where they get a first-round pick, and I don't think that that's what they really need. Well, where do you think? Do you think he gets traded in the offseason or the deadline, and what do you think they get back? Or not specifically, but whatever.
Well, Ristolainen's asked out, very, very casually the last three off seasons. He said, if I get traded, hey, that's great. I mean, I don't know if that's just him being matter of fact, like, hey, this could happen, but I mean, we've certainly all spitballed different deals the last three years. I'll believe he's traded when it actually happens. He seems to be a guy ownership really loves, and that edict seems to come from up high, that he's just not going to get moved. And I think the semi bounce back that he had for part of last season is enough to kind of keep them hooked in to be like, geez, maybe he's going to break out one of these years. He's 25 now, 26. I can't see the breakout happening. They've gotten a look at him for 7 years now. I just can't see it. And honestly, his numbers dictate that they'll be a better team defensively without him, just by getting him out of the lineup, because there's very few defensemen that rank out poorer than him. But everybody sees a big guy who can be physical, who's got a big shot and can be helpful on the power play. And they think it'd be crazy for them to trade him. I know Philly people love Ristolainen and they would love to see him there, but I think that's because they have an idea that they could turn him into like a mini pronger, which there's been nothing in Ristolainen's career to sort of point towards that ever happening.
Yeah, Provorov and Ristolainen would be a pretty decent pairing. Now the other thing with the Sabres, our colleague Lance Lasowski did a Q&A in the Buffalo News today and mentioned the name of Ricard Gromberg as somebody that the Sabres have interviewed. We've heard about Tocchet being interviewed. We've heard about Bruce Boudreau. And Don Granato is in the mix. It doesn't seem like to be a hot burner thing right now with the Sabres, but where do you think that they're going with this selection?
They have choices here, and I think their choices are going to be dictated by what happens with Jack. Honestly, because if you're going for a guy like Boudreau, or even a guy like Gallant, or somebody out of that realm, you're saying, we still think we can get into the playoffs right away. We still think we can handle this, that we can get through this with the right coach, which is something they've felt the last few coaches that they could do that. But I think if you're doing a full rebuild, you're tearing it down, you need a builder. You need somebody who can help develop at that level and help make these guys grow and get them through the growing pains that they're going to definitely go through, because I mean, their division is going to be wicked regardless. It's going to be unbelievably competitive. But they're in that spot. And honestly, if I'm interviewing for the job, I want to know what's going to happen with Eichel. I want to know what's going to happen with Reinhart and Ristolainen. Like, I want to know what kind of team I'm going to be coaching. Is it going to be an even younger team, or is it going to be a team with these guys that can lead the way, that can maybe make a run at a playoff spot? Because I think that really dictates whether I'd want the job or not. Honestly, the legacy the Pegulas have had with coaches, basically turning them over every 2 years. I don't know how eager I would be to get in there. That's where I think a guy like Bromberg makes sense, because he would be his first NHL gig. He's very well respected around the world. Swedish players love him. I understand.
He helped build that program up. He did, and he's got great hair, so that's good.
Yeah, that helps too. They could have the best hair of all the coaches. Him and Appert would just be a killer 1-2 combo.
And he coached Dahlin at the World Juniors, and he's a developmental coach, so it would make a lot of sense. And he was in the mix before. He was interviewed by the Sabres before. They always like to seem to go back to somebody they've interviewed before. That's why they went back to Tocchet for another kick at the can.
Yeah, all and right. I think that's another thing with like interviewing college coaches like Lehman and Carvel, even though Carvel's already recommitted to UMass. Yeah. That you go to those guys, you're thinking we're going to be developing here for a bit, and I think that's where maybe the holdup comes with even making an offer to guys like that.
No, I agree. All right. Get in the game with Upper Deck E-Pack, where you can buy, open, and collect hockey cards of your favorite NHL players anytime, anywhere. They're not just digital cards, but real cards you can get mailed directly to you. Trade with fans around the world. Sign up to open a free pack of cards every day only at upperdeckepack.com.
Okay, Joe, it's time for us to bridge into the current NHL playoff scenarios right now. Let's take a look first at the we can't even call them conference finals anymore. They're the Stanley Cup semifinals this year. So we're going to start with the one that looks like the Eastern Conference Final. We'll look at Tampa Bay and the Islanders, and I wanted to get your views on the series.
Well, this is going to be, I think it's going to be a tremendous series because this is, it's a rematch of last year's, bubble semifinal. And I can see there's a couple different ways you can look at it. You could say, all right, Tampa's really ramped it up. They're ready to go in for the kill to get it again this year. And then you have the Islanders on the other side looking to get back at the Lightning for last year, who they've got a ton of momentum. They've got the Nassau Coliseum crowd behind them to help them along now. So this is going to be a really fascinating setup. But I just, Tampa getting Stamkos and Kucherov back for the playoffs has been such a huge change for them, because the way they ended the season, you were just kind of like, all right, I don't know how these guys are going to roll with it, but obviously getting an MVP player like Kucherov and a former MVP player like Stamkos is just such a huge swing. But I'm going to be really curious to see how they handle how aggressive the Isles have played. The Isles have been on their toes for 2 rounds now, and they've been so physical and so nasty up front. And I think the catch is, and honestly, goaltending, if one guy cools off, whether it's Sorokin or Varlamov, the other guys just picked up the slack right away. So this is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think Nassau Coliseum is one of the tougher places to win in right now for a road team. No question. Doesn't mean Tampa can't take one there, though, because I think they can. I don't even look at the bubble last year. I don't even count what happened in the bubble. I think that's its own entity. And so, however the Islanders played against them and they played against the Islanders, it doesn't even mean anything to me. This year's Tampa looks just as good. I think the big matchup is Tampa's power play against the Islanders PK, because I think if the Islanders get a few more penalties called against them, that's something where it's pretty lethal. It's going to be hard to hold it back. I do think the Islanders have some injured players. We all talk about Hedman, but Hedman's still playing okay. He made one mistake. I think Eberle's banged up. He's a guy that I've noticed is banged up. And so I think both of those things are kind of equal. I think the goaltending edge goes to Tampa. And so I still have to give Tampa the edge in 7. I do think this will be a fun series, an entertaining series, and it could get into a dirty series. And we'll kind of see how it goes there.
Well, Anthony, the thing that Russ and I both observed on the Buzzcast during the Boston Islanders series was how ridiculous the Islanders were at targeting Bruins defensemen. The hit on Clutterbuck to me was suspendable, and then in Game 6 they were going after McAvoy. And not to say that Boston wasn't tough enough or didn't have any pushback, but Tampa is deep enough on the blue line that they might be able to withstand that abuse. They're big enough with guys like Cernak and Sergachev and David Savard, and they have their pushback. They have their guys who will do the same thing to the Islanders defensemen. So I don't think that advantage and that tactic is going to work for the Islanders against Tampa. And I agree with Russ. I think it's going to be a 7-game series. I think that the Islanders have been great during the playoffs. I begrudgingly round, but I just think Tampa is too good, and I think they'll win in 7. What do you think?
I mean, it's been, and I had since the beginning of the season, I've had a real good feel on the Islanders. I kind of lost a little bit of that feel towards the late part of the season. I picked against them against Pittsburgh. That was a mistake. And I'm not going to be making the mistake again. Even though the way things are going right now, you would think logic would dictate Tampa, but we know how this goes. We know how the playoffs are, and I think this is going to be an absolute banger of a series. And if it's a close one, and if they can keep these things close, I actually think the Islanders have a chance. Not only a chance to win the series, I think they may. I'm actually taking the Islanders in 7.
Wow!
So you're going Islanders in 7. All right. I mean,
okay, Joe. Let's shift to the other semifinal. And in my mind, this goes one of 2 ways. Either the Canadians maintain their lead they've had to where they by happenstance knock out or get the other team's number 1 or number 2 center to bow out either to injury or stupidity, or they realize that they're in a situation where they're the second best team. Now, they work hard and they've been very opportunistic, but I think Vegas is leaps and bounds better than the Canadians. But that doesn't mean that the Canadians can't win. If they match the formula of the first 2 rounds, then they could very well easily beat Vegas. But what do you think of this series?
Yeah, this series to me is going to be, I've been throwing dirt on the Habs for 2 rounds now, like thinking, well, this run's got to stop at some point because they just don't have the talent to match up. I mean, Price is a huge equalizer, but I mean, Vegas is by far the best team that they've faced. I know that's Leafs fans are going to be annoyed at me saying that because it's the Leafs and they were so good in the regular season. I get it. But Vegas is on a whole other level. I think this is the first time they're going to really see a team where they're outside of their Canadian realm now, and they're going to see how the rest of the world lives outside of it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be a very harsh wake up for Montreal because they haven't dealt with a team that plays as physical as Vegas, that has equal to or better goaltending than Montreal does, and a team that defends as strong as Vegas does. Vegas. I mean, they can score in bunches, but they can also shut you down all over the ice. They're a dynamic team, and it's so impressive that they were able to take out Colorado the way they did, because Colorado looked like a team that was destined to get to the Cup final, and they knocked them off. They spotted them a game and knocked them off. So I mean, that to me tells you everything you need to know about Vegas. I think Vegas is going to dominate them.
Yeah, Vegas really looks like they're on a mission. I've been picking with Montreal, and they've been doing really well. And the defense definitely causes problems for the other teams because Montreal's defense is tough, and they don't let you get to Price. And Price has actually been playing really well, beside nobody really getting in that crease. They defend it really well.
But Russ, Petrie breaks his finger on the porthole for the photographer, and they don't know whether he's going to play game 1. And even if he does play, what kind of Petrie are you getting when he can't shoot the puck?
Honestly, I wouldn't play him. I don't think he had been playing that great. He was kind of clunky with the puck for a lot of the first couple series, and I don't think Romanoff hurt him at all, and he's got better wheels. I don't think that's the death knell for them, but it hurts them. There's no doubt. It takes a veteran out, but I still believe in Romanoff. I do think the youth will will help them a little bit here. But I'm still going to go Vegas in 6. I love what Suzuki and Caulfield are doing. I just don't know if they can get over the mountain. I can't anticipate any bad injuries for Vegas. That could always happen to any team. Right now, Fleury is playing great. Right now, I don't know, has Leonard even been dressing as the backup? Like, I don't know what's going on with Robin Leonard. Has anybody seen him, heard from him? Just raise your hand if you have, because I don't know what's going on.
I'll check the last box score to see.
I believe he backed up the last couple of games.
Yeah,
He did.
I thought I saw on the bench, exactly, yeah. They were kind of using him almost as in game 1 of that series as almost a relief pitcher to give Fleury a breather before getting deep into this series. For me, when it comes to Vegas, again, we all kind of felt like this was sort of the Stanley Cup before the Stanley Cup. I mean, these were two absolute Titan teams that played each other, and I was duly impressed with the way Vegas handled, especially Mark Stone matching up against Nathan McKinnon he did such a fantastic job in that series. Again, it's also fascinating to see sort of one of the bigger trades in recent years sort of come to fruition in a Stanley Cup semifinal that we normally wouldn't see. The Pacioretty deal now, obviously, the former captain over now in Vegas, but of course Nick Suzuki, who they traded, being such a focal point offensively, I think for Montreal. But again, I think Vegas really is coming into this series on a roll after what they did against Colorado. They look like they want to finish this deal. They want to close. They want to get to this final and really kind of bring everything they've done during their first 4 seasons to a culmination point. So I'm going to in this case, I think the Habs will give them a good series. I think it'll be tough. It'll be as physical, I think, as the Tampa Islanders series, I think, will be, but I believe it'll be Vegas in 6, getting to the final.
All right, Mike said Leonard backed up game 6. I just haven't even seen him on the bench, so he's been cleverly hidden.
Well, I'll just say this because I already sort of gave my feelings.
So we don't need him again, Mike. What are you doing?
I want to say Vegas in 5, just because I don't like the Habs.
Right.
But
we established that fact.
Yeah, but I'll pay them enough respect that they could force it to 6 games, and it would do me a lot of it would give me a lot of pleasure to see them ice it away at the Bell Center and disturb the Hab fans. So I'll say Vegas in 6.
That's very big of you, Mike.
You know, sometimes they say picking a team to win in 5 is the coward's way of getting out of calling it a sweep.
Right, that's true.
I thought it was called the gentleman's sweep.
That's true.
I mean,
I did
plays out in
mention
reality, yeah.
Well, Craig Button from TSN picked the Leafs in 3, and then he said, "Oh, wait a second, it's a best of 7." So he said Leafs in 4.
That's Button just tweaking and tweaking,
yeah.
When he does that.
I do want to mention, I think it was Lance in the chat room. If you got up this early to actually be in this chat room, I'll answer your question. The cap's not going up. Cap's not going up until like 2023, 24. No matter, It's not a bad idea that he had as far as like just a little tweak to it mid-season or whatever it was, but it's not going up at all. So it doesn't. It's a.
I do have one more question for Joe, and I've kind of posed this out to Flyer fans, and I'm going to throw this out to you as well. Colorado getting parked in this second round series now. I view them now. They may be really. Do you think they're going to be lining themselves up for Seth Jones, Colorado? You think?
You know, I don't think so. I mean, they do need a little bit of help on the defensive end, but the Avs seem to do things very smart, and that's all on Sakic and the crew that they've got there. But they're a team that does keep a strong eye on the deeper numbers, the analytic numbers, and if you take a look at Seth Jones' numbers the last couple of years, not very good. He's kind of. I mean, he has the appearance of being solid, and yes, Columbus has had problems.
I mean, in games season. Watching him, he hasn't looked bad. If the underlying numbers aren't great, they've not been great for anybody in Columbus. Ask Patrick Laine. Yeah,
well, he's a different but similar beast unto himself there. But Jones, I would be it's very buyer beware on Jones because again, you're gonna have to give him a contract. here down the road too. So I don't know, and listen, Colorado's gonna have to end up breaking the bank for Makar when his ELC is up. So because you don't do a bridge deal for a guy like that, but in Jones' case, like he's already at a position where he's going to get a lot of money. I don't, the Avs can afford it. Like there's no doubt there. Like they've got plenty of space, but I just don't really see that as a fit for what Colorado's doing. They got so many guys there, and listen, if they get crazy and like if they get really crazy and they want to get involved in like the Eichel thing, they've got guys that they can make it work. But that's that's a whole other ball of wax. But I don't know. I just don't see Jones as a very good fit for Colorado.
The funny thing is, Joe, is that the fit for Jones might be Toronto, but like the Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan deal, there's probably no chance that Seth Jones would sign an extension to stay in Toronto. So they traded the value necessary to get Jones in Toronto. That probably would be a 1 year, one shot deal. And Dubas isn't doing that. Now, the question I had for you is, because you've covered the Leafs, obviously, 5 years in a row with the core group under Shanahan and Dubas, losing in the first round. Colleagues that we respect, like Chris Johnston and Elliot Friedman, are both saying that there's something, they believe something big and consequential will happen. But Shanahan and Dubas came out in the season-ending media availability and said the core four are staying. We believe in them, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you can make a consequential move and keep the core four together. And if they do and it fails, I think Shanahan and Dubas are probably done after this year. What do you think of the Toronto situation?
The Leafs are fascinating because I see a lot of the early 90s Red Wings in them, which I guess with Shanahan in charge, he was the answer for Detroit. I mean, they didn't win anything until he came into town. Like they didn't win the cup till he got to town. They won a lot, but they just didn't win the cup,
right?
Which is the same spot the Leafs are in. And that trade, the trade that brought Shanahan to Detroit, I mean, that was a big trade. I mean, that was Keith Primo, who was still young, who was unhappy in Detroit. Felt he should have been a top six center behind with Yzerman and Fedorov and Larionov ahead of you. That was never going to happen.
Right.
You throw in Paul Coffey into that deal for a lot of pizzazz and who scored a lot of points still. That was a huge deal. And that was a potentially franchise altering deal for Detroit, because if it failed on them, and Shanahan had some baggage already around him. So if it failed, the Wings were going to be like that. Jim Devellano and Kenny Holland and all those guys were going to get blown out of town. So the Leafs are in a spot where they've got to make a deal like that, as far as the effect, not like the same sort of proportions or whatever, but you have to have a deal that's going to make that same effect. The issue is, Detroit was able to get away with it back then because no cap, they just spent like crazy anyways, but Toronto's going to have to find somebody. If it's going to be if none of the core four is going to go, you got to find somebody who's worth the while to bring in to make a change that's not expensive, because you cannot they've already got 40% of their cap dedicated to those four guys. Right. You cannot bring somebody in who's another weighty contract to kind of help, nudge things along and get them out of the first round and, become serious cup contenders. But this, I think, if you're going to make a big deal, one of those four guys has to go. And it's not going to be Tavares. It's not going to be Matthews. And then it's a toss-up between Nylander and Marner. And Marner makes over $10 million a year. So good luck making that deal with anybody to take any kind of, to take equal money back. And, I know Toronto fans, the pipe dream is to trade straight up for Eichel. But like that's never going to happen. But like... But Willie Nylander, you got to trade him. He was their best performer in the playoffs, and he was great. He's been great, and his contract's great. So
Mike doesn't care, Joe. Mike doesn't care. No,
Mike just wants to cash out on Nylander while his value is that perceived high.
No, hey, all I know is if Nylander gets traded, I put the turban on my head and I get the envelope and I'm Karnak, because I've been saying it for 3 years.
Right. So maybe the deal is Willie Nylander for Ristolainen. Maybe that's the deal to be made.
I don't think the Sabres want to go down the Nylander family route after Alex success in Buffalo. But
well, the difference is Willie's a infinitely better player than Alex. So
the last thing, what's the date cutoff? And anybody can answer this, and I'll answer it too. That we think that if it gets to this date, Brendan Moore is not going back to the Carolina Hurricanes, because we all hear it's going to happen. It's a done deal. It's signed, and yet it's not signed. I'm going to say July 1st, because Seattle has to make a decision soon.
July 4th, because after he has his picnic and barbecue down there, and there's good barbecue.
Shirtless photo playing Frisbee.
Yeah, there you go. Then he'll be ready to move to the Pacific Northwest or someplace like that.
We're doing like the absence makes the heart grow fonder. I got a dad joke in for today. Woo! Okay.
All right.
No, I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna go with Mike. I'll say July 4th.
Okay. Sounds good, Joe.
I'd say middle of July. I'd say because you get a coach in before you can hire any coach before the draft. Like draft and all free agency and all that stuff doesn't happen until the end of July. So I'd say by the 15th, because if it takes that long, I think he's gone. Yeah, because I just can't see it happening. And Dundon, I mean, he draws weird lines in the sand, and I don't know if the line in the sand for him is paying the assistant coaches and driving your head coach nuts by not helping his guys out. That's not a good way to do business, especially when the head coach isn't paid great either.
It's not a good sign when he cheaped out on radio and TV and all the other things that he's going to cheap out on coaching and scouting and everything else. So
yeah, that's the thing, because if Brendan Moore's openly available, whatever team doesn't have a coach right now is going to be knocking on his door immediately, and that includes Buffalo, that includes Seattle, that includes everybody. Everybody who needs a coach is going to want him.
Do you think that in that case that if he is available, he's the top guy available in your mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You look at what he's done with that group in Carolina, and granted, they do have the players, but his ability to get those guys motivated and to get everybody coached up and coaching them the right way, using the parts that he has the right way, that's exactly what you need. And like, honestly, who's not going to go to war for a guy that looks like Rambo? Honestly, like that's like you're just not doing it.
Nope, that's fair. All right, Joe, listen. Thanks for coming on. Everybody can catch him at Die by the Blade and That Hockey Show, which kind of like, in essence, sounds like it could have like Uncle Floyd as the host, but I'm not sure. I haven't listened, but I've seen your questions online. I have.
Okay, well, thank you. That's nice to hear, and I'll tell Paulie Cuthbert that you said that he could be a good Uncle Floyd.
Uncle Floyd was a legend. Go look him up. a New York legend. I don't know if people know Uncle Floyd out of New York. They may not.
Well, Paulie's a Long Island guy, so if anybody,
he would know him. He would know him. Absolutely. No, he knows him. That's for sure. Well, that's it. That's it for Off the Post. We'll catch everybody next time.
Take care, everybody.